All right, so why is Kirby Smart so fiery all the time? This was something that was discussed Monday at Georgia, and part of it's just DNA. Okay, that's the short answer. Is that he is just wired that way, and that's the way that he is. But I did want to talk about what Kirby said about giving fiery speeches. If you remember a year ago, this is something we talk about in dog instruction. I actually have it written down. I'm not gonna read a lot of, and I blurted out in the book too. Um, it was halftime of the game where he talked about Georgia's experience in the 2020 game when they lost to the Gators. That's not the only time Kirby's ever lost to the Gators, but he talked very specifically at length here, and that's inside the book too. But at the end of the day, the number one quote was, "Physically, I want to break them." On Monday, he said this. He said, "I think it's just how you feel when, like where your team is at. What space they're in terms of confidence level, focus, attention to detail, and a lot of times it comes better when it comes from the players and the leaders within the team. Well, we know Nolan Smith's got plenty to say, and it's always fiery." Kirby goes on to say, "The best teams have guys capable of communicating to each other, and they listen to each other much more than they listen to me. So, I don't calculate it, figure out when I'm going to do it. If the appropriate time is there and I think we need it, then we certainly do it." And I talk a lot to y'all about my experience in college, and my coach uh, in basketball was very energetic. Him and Kirby Smart, in terms of energy and just just they're not dissimilar at all. And uh, you can't. With that said, you can't constantly be that way. You have to scale it back. You can't go 100 miles an hour all the time. And if you do that, they won't know when it's time to ramp up. And I think that's the important thing with Kirby, with what he's saying right there. It really is. He's saying, "Hey, listen, I don't have to do that all the time. That's not something that I want to do all the time. It's not human to be that way all the time." Now, I'm not talking about when he's coaching. Okay, when you're coaching and I'm talking very specifically about when he's giving speeches. And we've seen more than a few of Kirby's speeches get out into the public. I can assure you it's not me that's doing that. But um, when they get out there, to me, I think that it shows the passion he has for what he does, as well as for the players that he's recruited there and try to develop along the way. I do not view it as a bad thing at all. I almost never view it that way. There's a story too, and I'm not going to say which Georgia Tech player it was, but there was a Tech player who was extremely emotional and sobbing after a game that they lost to Georgia. In that, I think it was the '09 season. They were very distraught, and it hurt them. And I thought that was a very human reaction, frankly, to the situation that they were in. They had built that game up, and sports is very emotional, and playing your rival is a very emotional thing. And the caveat there is you have to do it in an appropriate way. You can't constantly scream and yell for blood. Can't always throw red meat. It's not appropriate to do that sometimes. I mean, you can't really expect for that to be a smart decision when you're going up against Vanderbilt. But I think Kirby almost always hits the right tone with his team. And the stuff that we hear that gets leaked out, yeah. I mean, listen, I hear a lot on the sideline, and I'm not going to share it because no, that's my choice, I guess. But I hear a lot on the sideline, and I mean, I think it's good personally. I think that it shows that there's a relationship between the head coach and his players. Now, again, like we write about in Dog Instruction, there have been times where he's been very vocal, very what's the word? Very colorful. Use colorful words to describe his situation. But you can't constantly do that, and that's I think he has a very good tone. I think his tone with the media sometimes is off, and it doesn't. I mean, I think that's something that's unnecessary. But that's normally on like during the week. That's not typically after games. And I feel like sometimes it's more in the off season, but whatever. That's his prerogative. It's his program, and whatever. But when he's talking to his team, I think that that's a really important part of coaching is communication. I mean, coaches are teachers, and they have to teach um, players that are in their system. Limited time. Listeners get 50% off of a $20 value, $0 in delivery fees when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code DAWG for dog post, DAWG. It's 50% off of a $20 value, $0 in delivery fees when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code DAWG. I've got it right down below. Again, don't forget the code is DAWG, DAWG, for 50% off of a $20 value, $0 in delivery fee from our friends at DoorDash, subject to change, and terms apply. I just got an email from the college football playoff, and they're confirming that the first rankings will be out on November 1st. So that's a week from today on Tuesday. Where will Georgia be ranked in the first CFP rankings? We don't know. It will depend. It will depend on what happens with the Gators. And that's an important game. And a season ago, Georgia was a pretty heavy favorite. Now, not as heavy as they are right now. This is the biggest line in the series history, at least in so far as I can tell. So it's a really, I wonder if the Gators can, play back-to-back games as pretty big underdogs as well as they did. Like, as I thought they played pretty well last year, to be frank. And well, I'm just getting bombarded with emails right now. But I am skeptical, I guess you could say, that that would be the case. But that's me, and I don't know. This is one of those games where I think if you're Kirby, you want to make sure you're remind. I mean, he will make sure that Georgia knows who they're getting into the ring with, and that's the Gators. I mean, this is a Florida team that you know is hobbled right now. They're not real good, and there's a lot of doubt about the Gators, understandably so. But um, so I don't know that coming off a loss to the Gators a year ago, that Kirby can really use that same sort of enthusiasm that he did last year in that game. This is a different team. It's a different. I think it's a younger team, and I think that that will matter as well. And so a lot of these guys, Kurt, I mean, Stetson, I think is 25, so he can't. I graduated graduate school and was 3 years. I was about to get married, I think, by the time I was 25. And so you're talking about a really older person, but he's surrounded by a fair amount of guys on this team that are relatively young. I mean, you think about uh, the running back, Robinson for sure. You've got McConkey, Gilbert, Bowers, uh, Broderick is young. I mean, it's not an old team, right? It's not full of fifth-year senior Jordan Davis and emotionally mature N'Kobe Dean and all these guys. You got guys like Chris Smith for sure, but Chris Smith's running partner is Malachi Starks, who's never played in this game before, and it's definitely a different atmosphere. And the sounds of games can affect your psyche, I guess you could say, going into it. When it's supposed to sound loud, is it loud? Well, it's really not in Jacksonville. When it's kind of strange to hear all the ambient noise in Jacksonville because one team is always on defense. And half the fans are there for their team, so there's always some noise. But I think Kirby modulates his message pretty well to the team insofar as I can tell. We get the stuff that's released. Obviously the stuff that's released not by Georgia is one thing. The stuff that's released, that leaks is another. But I think in both cases, frankly, every time I hear him, I mean, unless you got an issue with the language, which I do not personally, I would not talk like that to y'all or with y'all. But this is a public forum, and when he's in the locker room talking to his guys, it's different. And I think that he said what he said at Auburn in 19. He hasn't said that since, which I think is smart. But because you do want to represent the university in a particular way. But I think Kirby has been a very good communicator with his team. It's not surprising. He's learned it. He watched his dad coach for a long time, and I think he's come close to mastering it.